And now for tonight's talk, we have the Earl of Essex who will give us an English Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you. As we're not on the live feed, I shall remain seated.
They can hear you, but they can't see you.
Yes, well, that's what I mean. I don't need to.
I am hearing it for future reference.
Anyway, thank you, Chairman, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As some of you may know, this is my third New Sheridan talk this year, but you'll be comforted to know that I am now in a position to confirm that this will be the last talk I will give in 2023. Now, my plan was to give a talk that was seasonal and fairly brief so that we may have time to enjoy one another's company for the last time this year. But then I thought that's just what they would be expecting. So instead, I've decided to give a talk on the collapse of the Weimar Republic. The rise of Nazism in Germany in 1929 to 1939. This should
become topical again, hasn't it? They haven't caught them all yet, some of them still in hiding, the police are chasing them down.
This should take us up to about 10:50 p.m. and that's leave time for the last orders. Anyway, I was only kidding, so this is as described as an English Christmas, which is a selection of poems, essays and letters.
Mighty genius.
Okay, the first reading is Christmas by John Betjeman. I don't think he needs much of an introduction. He was 1906 to 84, poet laureate from 1972, and I think well known. Most people see him on television. This is a Tour de France going on, isn't it? Anyway, he wrote this Christmas in 1954. The bells of waiting Advent ring, the tortoise stove is lit again, and lamp oil light across the night has caught the streaks of winter rain in many a stained glass window sheen, from Crimson Lake to Hooker's Green. The holly in the windy hedge and round the manor house the yew will soon be stripped to deck the ledge, the altar font and arch and pew, so that the villagers can say the church looks nice on Christmas Day. Provincial public houses blaze, corporation tramcars clang, on lighted tenements I gaze, where paper decorations hang, and bunting in the Red Town Hall says, Merry Christmas to you all. And London shops on Christmas Eve are strung with silver bells and flowers, as hurrying clerks the city leave to pigeon-haunted classic towers. And marble clouds go scudding by the many-steepled London sky, and girls in slacks remember dad, and oafish louts remember mum, and sleepless children's hearts are glad, and Christmas morning bells say, come, even to shining ones who dwell safe in the Dorchester Hotel. And is it time this tremendous tale of all, seen in the stained glass windows, I can never read my own writing. This tremendous tale was seen in stained glass windows.
You can't read it, anything I feel.
No, exactly. The baby in an ox's stall, the makers of the stars and sea become a child on earth for me. And is it true, for if it is, no loving fingers tying strings around those tasselled fripperies, the sweet and silly Christmas things, those salts in inexpensive scent and hideous tie so kindly meant. No love that is in a family dwells, no carolling in frosty air, not all the steeple shaking bells can with this simple truth compare, that God was man in Palestine and lives today in God and wine. Oh dear.
You can keep going, it's... Might as well keep talking.
Yeah.
Everything's on the fritz today.
Okay, the Anticipation of Christmas by Henry James. Henry James was a very famous American-British novelist, one of the finest, in fact, 1843 to 1916, and he travelled a lot, and this is from one of his journals when he was in London in 1905. There is still something that recalls to me the enchantment of children, the anticipation of Christmas, the delight of a holiday walk in the way, the delight of a holiday walk in the way the shop fronts shine into the fog. It makes each of them seem a little world of light and warmth, and I can still waste time in looking at them with dirty Bloomsbury on one side and dirtier Soho on the other. Nothing changes. There are winter effects, not intrinsically sweet it would appear, which somehow in absence touch the chords of memory and even the fount of tears. As for instance the front of the British Museum on a black afternoon, the political portico when the weather is foul of one of the big square clubs in Pall Mall. I can give no adequate account of the subtle poetry of such reminiscences. It depends on association of which we have often lost the thread. The wide colonnade of the museum, its symmetrical wings, the high iron fence in its granite setting, the sense of the missing halls within, where all the treasures lie. These things look patiently through atmospheric layers which, instead of making them dreary, impact to them something of a cheer of red lights in a storm. I think the romance of a winter afternoon in London arises partly from the romance of a winter afternoon, from the fact that when it's not altogether smothered, the general lamp types take this hue of hospitality. Such is the colour of the interior glow of clubs in Pall Mall, which I positively like best when fog loiters upon their monumental staircases. And that's Henry James. This is one for the curate. The Curate's Christmas Eve by Harold Monroe. Now, Harold Monroe was a sort of obscure poet. My phone would light up. I can actually tell you when he was. Anyway, I think this was written in 1828. He actually he opened a poetry shop in Bloomsbury, which people would come in and they weren't obliged to buy anything. They sort of have coffee or tea and read poetry. Anyway, it wasn't a great success, as you can imagine. Anyway, The Curate's Christmas Eve by Harold Monroe. The curate and the spinster sit, O gentle dear timidity. Her yearning thought, his untried wit, her aspidistra and their tea combine to make their Christmas Eve complete, within itself and never sound nor sweet. Why should the moralist complain, the sentimentalist deride? She turns fond eyes on him in vain. She will not ever be a bride, for he is doomed to pass eternity sipping, nothing more than sipping tea. She will not be compelled to scold, nor he driven to complain. They are both better than gold. No mistletoe and no champagne will make her less a main, him more a priest, or turn their Christian to a pagan feast. The Stock Exchange Carol by J.B. Morton. J.B. Morton was a humorist and writer. He did actually write a very well-known column in the Daily Express called Beachcomber, which, unless you were around in the 70s, you probably won't remember. Swiftly come on joyful feet through wind and snow from Lombard Street to tell glad tidings far and wide of Patagonian allied. Noel, 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 Noel. Sing Johnny men who buy and sell, for Trans Rhodesia Corp ex bonus T has risen again to 93. Though far and near we hear the call, and Belgian zinc's begun to fall, sing we and tell with joyous tongue how badly old Sir George was stung. Noel, Noel, Noel. Bright is the light and wild and strange that shines above the Stock Exchange. Contentment crowns the happy scene. There is a boom in margarine. Noel, Noel, Noel. High over a voice is heard, Lord Funk is buying tin preferred. Loud chants the angelic syndicate, sell out at 48. Noel, Noel, Noel. Thank you letter by Sylvia Townsend Warner. Now she was an English novelist, poet and musicologist, so quite talented, but this is a letter she wrote in 1946 as a thank you letter. Dearest Elise, usually one begins a thank you letter by some careless comparison by saying, I've never been given such a very scarlet muffler, or this is the largest horse I've ever been sent for Christmas. But your matchbox is a nonpareil, for never in my life have I been given a matchbox. Stamps, yes. Drawing pins, yes. Balls of string, yes. Yes. Menacingly too often, but never a matchbox. Now that it's happened, I ask myself why it's never happened before. They're such charming things, neat as wrens, and what a deal of ingenuity and human artfulness has gone into their construction. For if they were like the ordinary box with a lid, they would not be one half so convenient. This one, though, is especially neat, charming and ingenious, and the tray slides in and out as though Chippendale had made it. But what I like best about my matchbox is that it is an empty one. I have often thought how much I should enjoy being given an empty house in Norway. What pleasure it would be to walk into those bare wood-smelling chambers, walls, floor, ceiling, all wood, which is after all the natural shelter of man, or at any rate the most congenial one. And when I opened your matchbox, which is now my matchbox, and saw that beautiful, clean-smelling, empty, rectangular expanse, it was certainly as though my house in Norway had come true, with the added advantage of being just the right size to carry in my hand. I shut my imagination up in it instantly, and it is still sitting there, listening to the firewood outside. Sitting there, in a couple of days' time, I shall hear the Lutheran bell calling me to go and sing Lutheran hymns, while the pastor's wife gazes abstractedly at her husband in a bower of evergreen, while she wonders if she remembered to put pepper in the goose stuffing. But I shan't go. I shall be far too happy sitting in my house that Alice gave me for Christmas. Oh, I must tell you that I finished my book, begun in 1941, and 100 times imperiled, but finished at last, so I can give my undivided mind to my matchbox. P.S. There's still so much to say. Carried away by my delighting form and texture, I forgot to praise the picture in the back. I've never seen such an agreeable likeness of a hedgehog, and the volcano in the background is magnificent.
That's quite a letter to write.
We won't send emails like that,
This is G.K. Chesterton. G.K. Chesterton, obviously a famous novelist. I think he was a religious apologist. I think he sort of struggled with his Catholicism, but he did write an awful lot about Christmas. He's probably better known to people nowadays as the author of the Father Brown stories. A Christmas Present by G.K. Chesterton. A person of great generosity has given me for a Christmas present an enormous resplendent walking stick with silver hands, a shiny handle and all sorts of things I have never heard of. Its splendour indeed creates a kind of problem. The walking stick and I do not suit one another. The only question is which shall give way. May it not reasonably be supposed that after a few days of my company, the walking stick may take on a more dingy, battered and comfortable look, or must I dress up to the walking stick? On the fairy tales on which I rely more and more these days, the touch of a wand can turn the beast into a beautiful prince. Perhaps the touch of the stick can turn the beast, now under discussion, into a beautiful dandy. Already I feel vaguely that I ought to have one neat kid glove with which to hold the stick. From this it is but a short step to having good cuffs and shirt links, and so the creeping perilous of propriety may crawl up my arms and cover my whole person. In a year or so the stick may have transformed me wholly into its own image. Whether this will happen I do not know, but what I do know is that if I can walk down the street with the stick, at present most people mistake me for a tramp who has stolen a gentleman's walking stick. After earnest thought, prayer and meditation, I have come to the conclusion that it is my destiny in life to be a foil to the stick. I'm only a background, a gloomy, a rugged background, against which the stick picks itself out in sparkling purity and directness. I suppose the strict grammatical definition of a walking stick is a stick that can walk. I'm sure this stick can walk itself. I'm merely a large florid tassel attached to it. The people of Battersea will merely praise the stick as they see it passing along the street. Then when their admiration of it is exhausted, if that be conceivable, they may add, and how artistic an idea to tie to this walking stick an ill-dressed and unattractive human being, thus celebrating supremely in an image the victory of the inanimate over the animate. I exist only in order to throw up the highlight upon the lustrous stick. What matters is that I am base so long as it is exalted. At any rate, this simple resolution to be a background to the stick is much less terrible than the other idea of living up to it. Now, everybody's familiar with the 12 days of Christmas, and I believe John Julius Norris, who was a historian and a television presenter. He was actually Viscount Norwich. He was the son of Duff Cooper, famous wartime politician. And anyway, he wrote this in 1998. So you can imagine this is a letter of thanks from the receipt. The lady who received the 12 days of Christmas gifts. 25th December. My dearest darling, that partridge in that lovely little pear tree, what an enchanting, romantic, poetic present. Bless you and thank you. Your deeply loving Emily. 26th December. My dearest darling Edward, the 2 turtle doves arrived this morning and are cooing away in the pear tree as I write. I'm so touched and grateful. With undying love, as always, Emily. 27th December. My darling Edward, you do think of the most original presents. Whoever thought of sending anybody 3 French hens? Do they really come all the way from France? It's a pity we have no chicken coops, but I expect we'll find some. Thank you anyway, they're lovely. Your loving Emily. 28th December. Dearest Edward, what a surprise. 4 calling birds arrived this morning. They are very sweet. Even if they do call rather loudly, they make telephoning impossible. But I expect they'll calm down when they do get used to their new home. Anyway, I'm very grateful, of course I am. Love from Emily. 29th December. Dearest Edward, the postman has just delivered 5 most beautiful gold rings, 1 for each finger, and all fitting perfectly. A really lovely present. Lovely in a way than birds, which do take rather a lot of looking after. The 4 that arrived yesterday are still making a terrible row, and I'm afraid none of us got any much sleep last night. Mummy says she would love to use the rings to wring their necks. She's only joking, I think. Though I know what she means. Well, I love the rings, bless you. Love, Emily. 30th December. Dearest Edward, whatever I expected to find when I opened the front door this morning, it certainly wasn't 6 sucking great geese laying eggs all over the doorstep. Frankly, I rather hope you'll stop sending me birds. We have no room for them, and they have already ruined the croquet lawn. I know you mean well, but let's call a halt, shall we? Love, Emily. 31st December. Edward, I thought I said no more birds, but this morning I woke up to find no less than 7 swans, all trying to get into our tiny goldfish pond. I'd rather not think what happened to the goldfish. The whole house seems to be full of birds, to say nothing of what they leave behind them. Please, please stop. Your Emily. 1st of January. Frankly, I think I prefer the birds. What am I to do with 8 milkmaids and their cows? Is this some kind of a joke? If so, I'm afraid I don't find it very amusing. Emily. 2nd of January. Look here, Edward, this has gone far enough. You say you're sending me 9 ladies dancing. All I can say is that judging from the way they dance, they're certainly not ladies. The village just isn't accustomed to seeing a regiment of shameless hussies with nothing on but their lipstick cavorting around the green, and it's Mummy and I who get blamed. If you value our friendship, which I do less and less, kindly stop this ridiculous behaviour at once. Emily. 3rd of January. As I write this letter, 10 disgusting old men are prancing about what used to be the garden, before the geese and the swans and the cows got at it. And several of them, I notice, are taking inexcusable liberties with the milkmaids. Meanwhile, the neighbours are trying to have us evicted. I shall never speak to you again. Emily. 4th of January. This is the last straw. You know I detest bagpipes. The place has now become something between a menagerie and a madhouse, and the man from the council has just declared it unfit for habitation. At least Mummy has been saved this last outrage. They took her away yesterday afternoon in an ambulance. I hope you're satisfied. 5th of January. Sir, our client, Miss Emily Warburton, instructs me to inform you that with the arrival on her premises at 7:30 this morning of the entire percussion section of the Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra and several of their friends, she has no course left open to her but to seek an injunction to prevent you importuning her further. I am making arrangements for the return of much assorted livestock. I am, sir, yours faithfully, G. Creek, Solicitor at Law. Thank you. So, to finish, I think we can only really finish on one story. Christmas dinner at the Cratchits from A Christmas Carol written by Charles Dickens in 1843. I was watching a programme of this recently. Actually, it's from last year, but I've only just caught up with it. Dickens wrote Christmas Carol in 6 weeks. He expected it to be a success. Indeed, it was. I mean, it sold out in 6,000 copies, but he spent so much money having the front piece lavishly illustrated. He didn't actually make very much money from the initial sales, but of course, the first editions now go for such a lot of money. Such a battle ensued that you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon to which a black swan was a matter of course, and in truth it was very like it in that. And in truth it was very like it in that house. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy ready beforehand in a little saucepan, hissing hot. I did say hissing. Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigour. Miss Belinda sweetened up the applesauce. Martha dusted the hot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner at the table. The two young Cratchits set chairs for everybody, not forgetting themselves, and mounting guard upon their post, crammed spoons into their mouths, lest they should shriek for goose before their turn came to be helped. At last the dishes were set on, and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, a murmur of delight rose all around the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife and feebly cried, "Hurrah!" "There never was such a goose," Bob said. He didn't believe there was such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavour and size and cheapness were the things of universal admiration eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes. It was sufficient dinner for the whole family. Indeed, as Mrs. Cratchit said with great delight, surveying one small atom of the bone upon the dish, they hadn't ate it all at last. Yet every one who had enough, and the youngest Cratchits in particular, was steeped in sage and onion to the eyebrows. But now the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Mrs. Cratchit left the room, too nervous to bear witness to take the pudding up and bring it in. Suppose it should not be done enough. Suppose it should break in turning out. Suppose somebody should have got over the wall of the backyard and stolen it while they were merry with the goose, a supposition at which two young Cratchits became livid. All sorts of horrors were supposed. Hello, a great deal of steam. The pudding was out of the copper. A smell like washing day, that was the cloth. A smell like an eating house and a pastry cook's next door to each other, with a laundress's next door to that. That was the pudding in half a minute. Mrs. Cratchit entered flushed but smiling proudly, with the pudding like a speckled crunched ball, so large and firm, blazing in half a quartern of ignited brandy, and became with Christmas holly stuck onto the top. "Oh, a wonderful pudding," Bob Cratchit said, and calmly too, that he regarded it to be the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Mrs. Cratchit says that now the weight was off her mind, she had her doubts about the quantity of flour. Everybody had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought it was at all a small pudding. For their large family, it would have been flat heresy to do so. Any Cratchit would have blushed to hint at such a thing. At last the dinner was all done. The cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. The compound in the jug being tasted and considered perfect. Apples and oranges were put upon the table and a shovelful of chestnuts in the fire. Then all the Cratchit's family drew upon the hearth in what Bob Cratchit called a circle, meaning half a one. And at Bob Cratchit's elbow stood the family display of glass, 2 tumblers and a custard soup without a handle. These held the hot stuff from the jug. However, as well as golden goblets would have done, that Bob served it out with beaming looks, while the chestnuts on the fire spluttered and cracked noisily. Then Bob proposed, "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us all," which all the family re-echoed. "God bless us, everyone," said Tiny Tim, last of all. That's your lot.
Thank you very much, Essex. I don't know if we have questions up to that side of the talk, but any observation?
A first edition copy of this, I just looked it up, between 60 and 70,000 pounds. And I just wanted to add, fantastic selection, Essex, thank you.
It actually sounds more valuable in its weight than gold.
Yes, we're going to do gold.
Correct. Whereas with the plot,
I think it sold out. It had an initial print on 6 out. I mean, he did expect it to be a success. It's just that he had it so lavishly illustrated because it was all hand done, no printing of it, you know. So that's why he didn't really. You know, I think he made about a couple £100, which probably was a reasonable amount, but not quite what he had expected. Anyway.
You might point out and go for offended and omission.
An omission.
Which I shall read. Yeah, it was Christmas Day in the cookhouse.
Yes.
The happiest day of the year. When sparks were full of gladness and their bellies full of beer. When up popped Private Shorty, his face as bold as brass. He said, "You can take your Christmas pudding and stick it up." I can't scroll up that.
Right, come again, Essex. There you go. Relatively brief. Short and sweet.
Like the old ones,
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.